Okay, welcome back to The Explainer. Today we're unpacking a story that perfectly, and I mean perfectly, illustrates the absolute hidden cost of arrogance. It all hinges on this one explosive moment. "Sit down and be quiet," my brother sneered. Then a guest pulled out his phone and gasped. Seriously, we're heading to an upscale Chicago steakhouse to witness a power dynamic flip so violently it practically broke the room. Sit down and be quiet. You have no idea who you're even sitting with, right? Just feel the dripping condescension in those words. This sneering command was delivered by a wildly boastful startup CEO named Julian, and the target of this public humiliation? His very own 27-year-old sister, Clara, right in front of 50 high-profile guests. But what Julian didn't realize as he soaked in the giggles of his wealthy friends was that he spoke those words just moments before his entire life completely fell apart. All right, let's dive into Act 1, the illusion of power. So to really understand this, we need to look at the crazy juxtaposition between our two subjects. On one hand, you have Julian. Growing up, he was absolutely the golden child. He spent his 20s hopping between all these flashy startups, collecting inflated job titles, and basically masterfully taking credit for everyone else's hard work. On the other hand, you have how the family actually perceived Clara. Because she kept a super low profile and rarely complained about her long hours, her family, especially Julian, just assumed she was this 27-year-old unambitious disappointment. They thought she was just scraping by on some low-level remote administrative work. I mean, Julian literally used her as a punchline constantly just to elevate his own status. And that brings us to the setting of our story. You guys, this wasn't just some casual Friday family dinner. No, this was a massive, high-stakes corporate event at a super upscale downtown Chicago steakhouse. Think polished mahogany tables, glittering crystal chandeliers, the whole shebang. The guest list had 50 city power brokers, investors, and high-ranking military donors. Why? Because Julian was absolutely desperate to land a massive $20 million defense logistics contract. Clara almost didn't even go. She only showed up wearing just a modest Navy outfit because their mother literally begged her to go and support the family. The dramatic irony here builds so fast. Let's look at how the evening unfolded. Clara walks through the brass doors at 7 p.m. By 7:05, instead of saying hello, Julian instantly grabs her arm, hisses at her about her modest outfit, and actually banishes her to a cheap folding chair in the back corner near the service kitchen. No way, right? He basically told her she was embarrassing them and to stay out of the way of the influential figures. And Clara, she just sat down, smoothed her skirt, and stayed completely calm. Which brings us to Act 2, the high-stakes dinner. So picture this. Julian is holding court at the head table. He's loudly bragging about these grand expansion plans, even pointing back toward Clara's little table and mocking mediocrity to his laughing guests. But when the conversation actually shifts to the real specifics of this multi-million-dollar defense contract, Julian gets way over his head. He starts making all these wild promises about supply chain routes and security protocols that aren't just unrealistic, they are literally legally impossible under current federal regulations. A sharp-eyed older gentleman with a military pin starts pressing Julian on strict compliance audits, and suddenly, the flashy CEO starts to stammer. Now, sensing the whole $20 million deal is basically about to go up in smoke, Clara decides to speak up from her little corner table. She calmly introduces the standardized Department of Defense oversight protocol. This is a factual, highly specific framework that completely bypasses third-party bottlenecks to handle these exact compliance issues. She delivers this super authoritative solution without missing a beat, her voice just carrying clearly across the entire quiet dining area. She stated it perfectly, saying, "The compliance issues can easily be addressed by integrating the standardized Department of Defense oversight protocol." Just imagine the absolute shock in this elite, hushed dining room. The sister who was quite literally banished to sit by the kitchen a second ago, the one painted all night as this unambitious failure, just delivered the perfect, high-level strategic answer that the flashy CEO couldn't even fathom. The entire room just completely froze. And Julian? Rather than being, grateful that his sister just threw him a massive lifeline, his face just flushes this deep, angry red. He spins around, eyes flaring with humiliation, and delivers that vicious line we talked about at the very beginning. He sneeringly orders her to sit down and be quiet, laughing dismissively to try and save face in front of the 50 guests. The crazy part? He is totally, completely oblivious to the explosive realization that is happening right behind him at the head table. That takes us straight into Act 3. The dramatic reversal. Okay, so you know that sharp-eyed gentleman who was pressing Julian earlier? Well, that was General Vance. He's a heavily decorated officer and actually the key advisor overseeing this entire $20 million contract. And he completely ignores Julian's desperate, awkward laughter. Instead, General Vance locks eyes with Clara, pulls out his sleek black smartphone, and actually gasps as he frantically starts cross-referencing an official government database. The quiet murmur of the room just vanishes. Everyone is watching the general's intense shift in demeanor as he matches Clara's face to a highly classified briefing file. General Vance lets out this audible breath, right? Like a look of just profound realization sweeps across his face. He literally turns his screen toward the business leaders next to him, and his voice just rings out over the dead silent dining hall. He says, "Wait, is that really you?" And as the source material points out, Julian's super confident smile just instantly wavers into absolute sheer confusion. So Julian immediately goes into this frantic damage control mode. He chuckles nervously, desperately pleading with General Vance to just ignore his sister. He doubles down on his lifelong narrative, publicly claiming Clara is just some remote administrative worker with absolutely zero knowledge of how high-level defense contracts operate. I mean, the guy is literally digging his own professional grave in real time, still trying to belittle her career just to save his fragile ego. Okay, so what happens next is the ultimate twist. General Vance stands up abruptly, and you can just imagine the sound of his chair scraping against that hardwood floor. He snaps at the CEO. "Quiet, Julian." And then he drops the bomb. He says, "You're talking about Director Clara Thompson. She is the Chief Logistics Strategist for the Department of Defense's Oversight Division. She's the primary official assigned to review, authorize, or reject your entire contract application." Wow. Clara isn't an admin. She literally holds the keys to the entire $20 million deal, and Julian just told her in front of everyone to sit down and shut up. The power dynamic in that room completely inverted in a matter of seconds. General Vance walks all the way to the back to shake Clara's hand with deep respect, actually apologizing that she wasn't seated up at the head of the table where she belonged. A ghostly pale Julian just starts stammering, begging to know why she never told him her true job. And Clara, she just delivers this icy, absolute mic drop response. "Because you never asked, Julian. You were always too busy using me as a punchline to boost your own ego." Let's move into our final section, Act 4, the cost of arrogance. So the investors who had been laughing along with Julian all night, yeah, they were now staring at him with just undisguised disdain. The party broke up fast. Julian actually chased Clara down the hallway out to the valet stand in a total panic, sweat practically glistening on his forehead. All that swagger? Completely gone. He begged her to alter the official audit, pleading that his insults were, just a joke. But Clara delivered a super cold reality check. She absolutely refused to lie to the DOD to cover up his terrible behavior, telling him point blank that true leadership requires actual integrity, something he clearly lacked. And guys, the sequence of ruin that followed was unbelievably swift. General Vance had openly questioned Julian's character right there in the dining room. So step 1, Julian's firm officially fails the integrity and leadership audit conducted by Clara's division. Step 2, literally by the time Clara reached her car, the main investors had already emailed the board to completely pull their funding. And step 3, Julian's entire company collapses within just 2 months. I mean, the evaporation of his business was absolute and total. So as the dust settles on this whole mess, Julian was basically forced to rebuild his entire career from the ground up. But this time, he had to do it without the safety net of his false bravado. And Clara, she simply went back to her life, keeping her head down and continuing to lead high-level strategy for the DOD. Interestingly enough, their mother did eventually call to apologize for the family taking Clara's quiet nature for granted all those years. I think the core takeaway here is just crystal clear. The loudest person in the room is often the very first one left with nothing to say when the truth finally comes to light. Which brings us to the end, and I want to leave you with a question to think about today. Are you building your life on smoke and mirrors or quiet integrity? Because as Clara's story so brilliantly shows us, you really don't need to make a massive scene to earn respect. You just need to work hard, stay grounded, and simply let your results do the talking. Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer, and I really hope it leaves you thinking about where the true source of power actually lies.